Around 83% of enterprises are going to repatriate cloud workloads to the private cloud.
90% of these statistics are manipulated or made up on the spot.
100% true.
Welcome to another episode of Experts in Polo Shirts. I'm Chris.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Matt.
Today we're talking about cloud repatriation. Is it really all it's cracked up to be? Recently, we noticed that Michael Dell quoted a Barclays CIO survey stating that around 83% of enterprises were going to repatriate cloud workloads to the private cloud. And is Michael Dell's opinion weighted towards the fact that Dell sell hardware? Maybe. But first of all, I thought it'd be worth us asking the question from one of you guys. What is cloud repatriation?
Okay, so cloud repatriation is where you're just going to take a workload that you've got in a cloud provider of your choice and you're going to bring it back to on-premises. So whether that's a data center or your HQ, you're going to pick it up and you're going to move it back. And that could be any number of reasons. You might cite cost, you might cite security, and there's other things around that, but the bulk of it is you're taking a workload you've got in a cloud and you're bringing it back to on-prem. It's that simple.
So broadly, do we think there's any truth to what Michael Dell's saying? Well, I should be clear, not what he's saying, like you said, Barclays CIO survey, but something that he's cited. Mm-hmm. Do we think there's any truth in that survey? I mean, obviously, it's a survey, so there has to be some truth to it. Yeah. But what do we think is driving that? Do we think we're going to see that over the next 5 years?
Yes, I think so. And then looking into the same report, absolutely. I think it is going to happen. But if you take that single line out of context, then the information that you get is... It might seem like cloud is over and everyone's going back to on-prem. Everyone wants to in the data center again. And
Michael Dell would like you to believe that.
I think he would. I think he would want you to believe that.
Yep.
Just looking at some more of the figures that are in there is that cloud spending is planned to increase. These exact same CIOs that were interviewed have said that in the next year, cloud spending is going to increase. They also said that on-prem spending is going to increase, so private cloud is also going to increase. However, that's actually reduced. The amount of people that think that's going to increase has gone down. So potentially the private cloud spending is going to go down. So the repatriation may not necessarily be new hardware, new systems. It could actually just be people using what they've already got. They've tried the cloud, it was good, they're working today, but maybe there's some other features that they want back from on-prem.
Or it could just be a single workload, couldn't it, that they're trying to bring out. It could be one thing they've migrated, it's not working for them up there, either cost, performance. So they're trying to bring that back down to on-premise.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also point this is like based on the enterprise rather than like SME and mid-market. Mm-hmm. And we know that in enterprise, like database technology is super expensive. So you've got a big old database sat on all the time and you can't optimize that into PaaS or another technology, or you just need so much throughput that those costs in Azure are super high. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just that important because I think do we think we'll see the same thing in the sort of SME space in terms of repatriation? Or do you think that enterprise has got the scale where it makes more sense?
I think we're going to see it at all scales, but the scale doesn't necessarily mean all or nothing, like it might seem if you read Michael Dell's tweet. It's some amount could come back. That could be one single server. It could be one small application. It could just be going, we've got storage here. Why don't we just save X amount of money and move it back to the on-prem storage that we've got? So I think it's potential, but it's such a use case scenario. Like these giant enterprises, yes, they've got the scale. They probably have data centers, not just storage in a data center somewhere. They've actually got data centers. And they are just planning to reuse what they've still got. Like they've already got all this in place. Let's use it. Which is why I think one of the main items that was cited was cost, but it wasn't the only driving factor. Security is one consideration. But then the idea around like cost and security, it wasn't a huge percentage of people that were citing these. It was a moderate number, but when you take it all hand in hand, it could just be skill set as well within the organizations.
Do you think that perhaps if we wound back the clock a few years, that enterprises decided that Azure was the holy grail, lift and shifted everything, and are now paying the price today because they've not modernized their application stack?
Yeah, I think they've probably not seen the growth their business is under as well. Like I say, there's more data than ever now, so people are getting bigger databases, more data, it's almost like you say, it's running away with them, the cost then, and they're not controlling what's there.
I think something as well in the market is that sort of COVID growth / illusion era for a number of businesses and sectors that grew during COVID exponentially, where they've seen rapid growth. I'm thinking players like Zoom, not necessarily that they are in Azure, but players like Zoom will have had exorbitant growth during COVID and might have upscaled everything.
Yeah.
But now everything's leveled off. Perhaps they're carrying a lot of costs in the public cloud environment that they needn't carry.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, something that I've seen as well is digital transformation roadmaps that companies were talking about. Digital transformation to potentially an uneducated board could just be taking your server and copying and pasting it up to your cloud provider.
Tick.
So great.
Transformation.
We transformed, but we didn't optimize anything, and now the cost is higher. Or we're locked, like we can maybe make the cost the same, but now we're locking in for X number of years. Yeah. So it could potentially have been a bit of a trap companies might have got themselves in as well there.
I think that is a huge trap that people fall into. So you mentioned before about cybersecurity considerations in terms of might be one of the driving factors behind repatriation.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that we think that so in terms of delivering controls are easy to achieve in Azure? Or do you think actually that there's something that we're not considering around repatriation?
No, I don't think there is anything that I can't do on-prem that I could do in the cloud.
But how much money would you need to be spending to get that solution on-premise? So if you're an SMB, could you be affording that compared to an enterprise client? You know, the expensive firewalls, all the protection you've got, the cost of that in Azure versus doing it on-premise yourself.
For an SMB?
Yeah,
I see what you mean, because I guess as you go higher up in the complexity, I suppose it's all relative depending on your scale though.
Yeah.
But it's giving SMBs easier access to that technology as opposed to I think
DR is always a good example, isn't it? The price of DR in Azure, you're not paying for hardware to be sat on the other side, the SAN, the firewalls, the connection, etc. to be there. So really a lot of these smaller business before probably didn't have that level of DR, and now they've gone to Azure, they've got that level of DR, so it's almost like a step backwards for them.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed there were some comments on one of the posts on LinkedIn talking about AI and privacy concerns, but I'm not exactly sure how those apply in terms of the argument for repatriating workload. Because surely if you're going to move workload back to on-prem, no one's going to go out and build like an on-prem open AI, surely. I mean, even at the enterprise scale, you're going to need, I'm imagining, like NVIDIA's stock price would go up significantly because of the tens of millions of hardware that you'd need.
It's true, yeah.
But do we think there's any benefits from a sort of AI and compliance perspective to moving back certain workloads?
Yeah, it's funny because it's all over the comments for this thread. Wherever you find this thread, all the comments, there's a lot of people worried that AI is going to scoop up all their data. I think, you know who isn't worried about that? The CIOs. That wasn't a factor, and AI growth is actually it's expanding. That's one of the main reasons that actually IT spend is going up in the next 1 or 2 years, according to these CIOs. So I don't think that's a worry. At least at this enterprise scale, they don't seem to have the same worry that some of the end users might have. Maybe because the CIOs are very well educated in the space. So I don't see it being a problem. The information's out there. You can go see how secure it is on the enterprise options. Like Microsoft's OpenAI, obviously, AWS is second for growth expectations. They're huge. They're growing. These enterprises are pumping money into it. I think, given the resources they have, that probably shows us enough that it's secure as it is, without knowing what I already know anyway, which it is relatively secure, yeah.
But I think if you look, what's the main information people are passing? It's within email, isn't it? And most of these big clients, they can still be within probably Exchange Online, aren't they, for their email? So a lot of their key data is still going to be stored in the cloud. You can't see them bringing it back to Exchange On-prem. Obviously, Microsoft aren't developing it.
Yeah.
So that kind of say the most of the data will be in there already.
That's a good
point.
point.
So you got your Teams.
Yeah.
You SharePoint. It's kind of...
There's no escape.
Tied in.
That's such a good point.
Going back to on-prem Exchange.
I'm worried that this illegible database is going to be read by OpenAI. What about all of your emails? Your entire organization?
I suppose, though, is there an argument that actually you've got a bit of a cost optimization exercise? Because if you want to spend more on AI, which is expensive, and data analysis and all the other services, is there an argument actually I've got a certain finite budget to spend. I need to move this database back on-prem because I'm going to save £2 million a year on doing that, and I need to use that money to go and chase the AI dream.
Yes, I think that legitimately is it. Like, look at the numbers. Cloud spend is increasing. Like, more of these giant organizations think cloud spend is going to increase. On-prem private cloud is not going to increase as much from as many people. But if they're moving databases and storage back to on-prem, but everything's increasing in the cloud, what are they going to use that saving for? AI, optimization, like the things that they probably would have liked to have done 6 years ago when the technology wasn't ready. But yeah, it completely makes sense. They want to save money where they can. Storage is potentially one if they're already paying for it, and then spend that money wisely on something else.
It almost feels like you're going to be left behind as well, though, if you move it out and all these cool new tools that come in, AI, all the database bits, and then you're moving back to on-premise, you're kind of losing all that functionality. You can be left behind the times then.
And the cost to build, and the time to build all of something like that, if you were going to try and do that on-prem, I just think it would set you back, I'm sure, months.
I think we've all been there. The skill set involved to build an on-prem infrastructure and build it properly and it be reliable, no downtime, patching SAN servers, it's a lot of work. And to throw DR into that as well. And businesses now working 24/7, aren't they? It's not like the old days we could have a full weekend to migrate the servers. It just wouldn't happen, would it?
Yeah, that's true.
And how do you think that, for example, like from a skill set perspective, we think about, we're in a scenario where like most people now are talking about moving to Azure. We've got enterprise space talking about moving some workload back on-prem. How do you think over the next 5 years we'll see the skill set shift? Do you think it'll become, is it like 75% of public cloud engineers, 25% on-prem? Or does that on-prem resource start to become like finite in terms of the people that know it? Like gold dust.
Yeah, I think I've thought about that. We've discussed that as well because it's quite interesting to think like, okay, we can move more back to on-prem. So now, what are you going to do for skill set? Because all those people that saw the dwindling numbers in the on-prem world, they said, I've got to adopt cloud for my own career, just what I've got to do. So now they've gone and adopted the cloud. They've changed their skill set. What are the enterprises going to do? Are they just going to have to double teams? Are they going to have to keep the same size team in each side? Like, what are they going to do? Like, surely if they're bringing more on-prem, costs are going to increase in salaries as well. Because they're going to have to hire back staff that they had, or, like you say, that skill set is a little rarer now because people had to move away because there was less work in it. So then are they going to have to pay more for that skill?
But you probably can't even get the talent, can you? So if someone's saying to you now, I've got a job, it's on-prem infrastructure, you're going to be like, no. I can see where the future's going.
I've had conversations with plenty of people like that. A lot of people want to move to cloud. Like a few years ago, it almost felt like a buzzword. I say a few, like we're talking like 7 or 8 years ago. It was a kind of a buzzword at the time. But now it is a case of I am going to dedicate myself to this cloud vendor because previously we're saying on-prem and cloud because if your skill set is in Azure, you might actually know how to do so many more things than you would have been doing, because if you were a VMware expert, you're great with VMware infrastructure, you can build a server, excellent. But then you might have had a SAN team to worry about the SAN. You'd have had a network team, security team. There's a chance that person is the same person in Azure because it's all under one roof. So you're kind of expected to know it. I saw that shift as well. I've seen that. I've seen departments where there was a dedicated network team, there was a cloud team, became one team. Because that's how it worked. Like that's how it is with Azure. It is almost one product. You kind of need to know how everything works to make sure it's secure, especially if you go in highest quality cloud adoption framework, you want to do everything perfectly. That person needs to know all the parts of that lifecycle ideally so they can deliver it. But yeah, the on-prem as well, which skill set are you going to choose? Are you going to expect everyone to now know 10 different vendors of products for 3 different skill sets? So you need to go and learn your VMware and Hyper-V and Nutanix for on-prem. Are you going to go and learn Checkpoint, Palo Alto and FortiGate firewalls? Because you can't just learn one. Yeah. Because there's potentially like an overlap of products. There's so many considerations there. It's huge. Yeah.
I think it's the developers, isn't it? Is the big shift for them. I think young talent coming through the market aren't going to be knowing the legacy systems. They're all going to be focused on the cloud-based solution. So I think the biggest change for people, I think, is probably the developer side. 'Cause it's such a big shift for them going from the traditional SQL Server, etc. Yeah, it's kind of
What do you mean I need to run it on a full fat VM?
Yeah, all the PaaS efficiency is going to go back to virtual machines. Yeah,
I suppose you've still got some, moving back on-prem, you've still got opportunities for things like Docker and Kubernetes. But it's whether, and I guess in enterprise you're going to have that, but you're not, some of that management tooling that comes in the public cloud is not going to be there. And then you're going to have to go and build that. Now you've got to manage that and all the other headaches that go with it.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, we've heard customers talking about lower latency in private cloud environments versus Azure. But I suppose it'd be worth us talking about what we've seen when it comes to latency in Azure versus private cloud.
Yeah. Latency, there's certain databases out there that require extremely low latency. We're talking sub-millisecond latency. Those sometimes can't even go through a firewall, even if the firewall is on site and it's only 10 foot of cable between server and server, but it goes through a firewall, won't work. Same layer 2. So there is options to build it like that in Azure. Like we've had that conversation, we've had these considerations, and it's generally been fine with what we've needed to do, the use cases we've had with certain databases that need this low latency. We've been able to put everything next to each other. Security is tight, it's bulletproof, but they are as close to each other as they can. As long as you set up all of your like groups and connections and zones and resiliency, redundancy, as long as everything is set up correctly, it'll be fine. Exactly like you would have been doing on-prem with a VMware. You're setting up your DRS because these servers need to live together. You've got the exact same considerations in your cloud. So yeah, as far as I've seen with latency, yes, I think it's not been a problem.
What about the whole VPN versus on-prem versus express route? Like in terms of like the sliding scale in terms of latency, like how does it sit? Like if on-prem is 2ms, where's express route versus VPN when it comes to communicating from on-prem to Azure?
Again, we're in a hybrid world in this environment anyway. So your VPN, your express route, like the latency is going to be dependent on where you're located. We're quite fortunate. It's the UK. Even like getting from north to south is only a few milliseconds. It's not double digits like you'd be going across country. But in those cases, then if your workload is located next to the express route, then you should theoretically be able to get the speed of light to where you're going. So if you're going from Manchester to London, we're talking about 6 milliseconds at speed of light across a fibre cable. And then that's the speed that you could potentially expect to see on your express route. If we're doing VPN, it's going to be 20 something.
Yep. Because
that's just the speed of the internet generally within a country. That which is the exact same as if you had a workload in 2 private data centers that were across a country. If you're using the right tools, you can get the speeds that you would have been expecting previously anyway.
So I suppose that's the whole benefit with express route is 50% of the latency, a reduction in latency, increase in performance. So that, it's interesting that we don't see a lot more express route. And I think it's because everyone's become accustomed to VPN being so good. But I think where you've got latency, express route stands out significantly as a real driving force behind getting that reduced. So one thing that I think people are concerned about as well, which might be driving some of this, is vendor lock-in. But I think my opinion on this is that like the market determines the fact that vendors can't lock you in. And this is the Broadcom thing all over again. Like I think Broadcom thought, hey, we've got everyone here, but actually they haven't because there's a competitive market. And my belief is that as long as the likes of Amazon, GCP coexist with Azure, that there'll be competition. What do you guys think in terms of like, should people be repatriating because of the risk of vendor lock-in?
Like I say, there's competitive market out there. It's competitive price on storage, things like that. But I think people are embedded in the Microsoft ecosystem a bit more. It's like every business you speak to now, they've got Teams, they've got Exchange Online. They're not going around. It's the leading product that's out there. Yeah, I think for me, like I say, there's kind of no worries. There's tools out there to migrate you away from it. They're not forcing you to keep the data in there. There's no cost to get the data out now. Is that correct? Did they change it?
Yeah, I think there's cost to get the data out, but not in Classic. It's quite expensive as well, actually. I suppose that's one. But I suppose if the economics mean that it's more expensive, then you're just gonna take the hit on the data transfer costs anyway. Mm-hmm. You can, if you get an express route unlimited, and you're gonna throw some serious bandwidth.
If you were clever, you could route it in a way that the express route just covers it for you.
Yeah, but you'd have to spend the express route is pretty chunky for the unlimited edition. So you'd be shifting some serious data for it to make sense.
Yeah. But, lock-in though, So, I mean, again, I've read the report. I'm like looking at this. So the highest cited reason for worrying about lock-in is storage, which makes sense. Take a blob. You've got an AWS bucket, getting these things to speak to each other, or you're going to use Azure files. And then that can create considerations around how do we move that around? How do we access that? But if you know what you want when you're building it, the options are there. You can have global resiliency. You can have multi-data center resiliency within your region. Like, the options are there to make it as accessible as possible within that ecosystem. And it was about 10% that were worried about that. So it's a figure. It's a figure to consider, but it's not like the end of the world. And second highest for lock-in was firewall at 5%. Only 5% mentioned it, which is it's a number. It's not huge. That was the second highest that worried about lock-in. It's firewall, which I get because cloning a firewall policy between firewalls has always been work, regardless of on-prem or cloud vendor. It doesn't matter. That's probably one of the things that's most similar, at least from my point of view. A lot of networking background is trying to copy between a Sonic Wall and a FortiGate or a checkpoint or to Azure firewall. Most of it's very similar.
Yep.
You got your source and destination, you got your ports, your IPs, your URLs, however you're going to do it. The slight differences generally seem to come from what UTM tools they're letting you have. But apart from that, you could almost programmatically recreate what you've got anyway, if you had the team, which I'd imagine these enterprises do, which is probably why even that as the second highest cited reason for worrying about lock-in is only 5%.
Yeah, and I suppose also with the advent of MVAs, you've got a little bit of reduction in that sort of lock-in.
Which I feel that's probably why it was one of the products that Microsoft pushed, at least in Azure, as this is one of the first third-party things that is going to be really well integrated. You can start putting inside a V1 as well now. You've got these MVAs. Just here's the big three vendors, and then adding more and more on as they want. But you've got the top right Gartner quadrant straight away. They've been accessible for years now.
No excuse not to move to Azure now.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Is it worth posing the question of if a client did come to you, Chris, and said, we've got our workloads in Azure at the moment and our costs are spiraling, kind of what steps would you take, I guess, to assess it, and, what considerations could they make to reduce the costs?
Or even assuage their fears, I guess. Yeah. You don't need to run away from the cloud. Let's look at it, because chances are if we build it right, we could probably protect that as well.
So I think a lot of what we see is where clients have got engineering teams that weren't built in the cloud. So people that have repatriated workload from on-prem up to Azure, what we tend to find is a lot of bad habits stay around. So we see a lot of stuff like you're not paying for what you actually need. So clients are buying the wrong tier of storage. They are not reserving virtual machines. They are over-speccing resources. Yeah. They're over-speccing SQL managed instance. There'll be instances as well where the Microsoft Cloud Advisor that tells you what to save money with doesn't actually tell you the things that will save you money. And we see that pretty much time and time again. I think there's always going to be the room for, and it's the super beefy servers. So one thing I sort of think about when I think about repatriation and the kind of clients that we deal with is that even if we had one or two servers where we're these one or two machines huge SQL servers, actually they kind of would be a bit more cost effective in hybrid or private cloud. You've got to weigh up the issue there, because now you've got to move an element of that workload to private cloud naturally. Mm-hmm. You're going to lose a lot of compliance stuff there. So now that private cloud environment's got to meet a certain compliance standard to provide those assurances to third-party suppliers. And actually the cost of doing that, the cost of that managing that almost separate technology, often means that it just doesn't make sense to move stuff, just to move 1, 2, 5 virtual machines over into a private cloud environment. But I think, it's people that aren't used to managing that kind of environment typically will see stuff done in a way it's I've done it this way. It works. It probably doesn't follow the cloud adoption framework. It's probably not built to best practice. And the other thing as well is that maybe it was best practice like 3 to 5 years ago, but actually there's new products in Azure, there's new SKUs, things have changed, there's more effective ways of doing things. I think like it's kind of like slightly off topic, but like one thing we see at the moment a lot of is lack of V1 or firewall on that gateway deployed in Azure. Like really, really common, just totally missing. And just an example of that one, next year, I think September 2025, that goes away. So new machines won't be able to have that, won't have any default internet access. And there's going to be lots of people going to have to do rework to help accommodate that in their solution. And I think that's whereas every solution we've built in Azure has been built with that in mind. And that's the difference between like where you're working on Azure every day across multiple customers to you've had an infrastructure, you've had to move it, and you've had to learn as you go. And perhaps you're managing like Azure and on-prem infrastructure. But yeah, it's often, nearly every time we've had that, we've been able to find the right level of savings in that environment to have it start making sense again to the client.
I think it's like I say, it's getting it kind of right first time as well. There's people who move service to Azure then think, oh, actually, I need to put backups on. I haven't put any antivirus on it. I haven't done ASR. And then kind of you're in there and those costs are kind of spiraling. So it's getting it right. Okay, the first time. Right first time. The
amount of comparative quotes I see where I get sent them. Here's an estimate from someone else. You guys are more expensive. I'm like, okay, what have they missed?
No file.
There's no file, there's no bandwidth, there's no backup, there's no defender. There's all these things and the client's going to get that service and month 3 of getting that service, the costs will be significantly higher, like to the tune of often like 20%. And this is the problem that in our space, there's not a huge number of organizations that do Azure like properly. And I think that's tarnishing it with that brush.
I think that's when the people feel locked into the products almost then, don't they? 6 months into the journey into Azure, it's not been done correctly and costs are just spiraling out of control compared to if it's put together correctly at the start. They're aware of the prices. And kind of the growth plan the company's going through, they can estimate what it's going to be.
Exactly. I think that's a huge issue, and it's just that getting the estimation right. And the reason that I think it doesn't happen right very often is it takes time. And the reality is to do it properly, you need the performance data. I think lots of people out there are just sticking it in the Azure pricing tool and not accommodating for any like disk transactions, backups, etc., like you mentioned. And that does taint people's opinion of it.
Limited skill set. It's just a key one. It is like a standard hard disk on a key VM. So many things where they're just using the wrong SKU, cost savings are down, they have to accommodate, they just increase a SKU here and there to something that isn't needed because it's just a lack of awareness of all the little features that you just need to know inside and out. Reserved instances just not existing for a lot of people, scaling plans, anything. So many ways to look at the cost intelligently while still getting the performance that you need.
So I think we've seen as well with database workloads, just like missing things in database configuration and missing management. So we might see like missing indexes. We see like drive configuration where like the host caching is incorrectly configured and it's all misperforming. Or like there's no accelerated networking. And we see stuff like that time and time again. And what's happening is organizations that don't have the skills are throwing big disk SKUs at those. But that solved the problem. £2,000 a month later for that disk, please. Thank you very much. And that's I think it's a shame. That's where that significant technical skill set is really valuable because you've added that disk that cost you $2,000 a month. Actually, if you rejiggled the disks this way and added indexes for this XYZ database, now actually we're going to get that performance up and we're not going to need that same level of throughput on that disk.
And do you think as well as the third-party vendors that are providing a lot of these apps on these servers, like they're kind of not up to speed with it either? They're kind of stuck in the past of this server needs 128 gig of RAM, 16 CPU, it needs to have X, Y, Z. And I think obviously not providing the support that some companies need then when it's within Azure.
So I just had a call today with a vendor who told me they needed dedicated hardware as part of the solution. So they need to have 2 dedicated or 3 dedicated or whatever quantity of nodes it was running VMware to run 6 VMs. has to be absolutely dedicated because performance constraints. And I guess the issue for a vendor is when like they are a high scale organization. I believe there are like multiple thousands of staff that work there. Their issue will be, of course, that it's all well and good knowing that like one environment is running properly and it's well maintained, but actually when you scale that across thousands or tens of thousands of clients, and you've got a VMware farm where like it is perhaps like a little bit mismanaged and it's running on empty and it's it's just totally being sweated to the max. Like that's where like they have a problem. So I can understand it from the vendor perspective, and then as well like, can you imagine into refactoring an application like that into like public cloud native? There's just no way they're going to go and do that.
Yeah,
it's but they're going to have to start to move with the times because I think organizations are demanding software that's more agile, and they're going to have to start to facilitate that with like quick development timelines, and that's what comes from a modern application stack. And so I suspect that those, should we call them like the dinosaurs, are going to have to innovate or pretty much be left behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I note that in the report, no one cited reliability or IT roadmap as one of the reasons for repatriating workload. Why do you think that is?
I think the enterprises, the SMBs, the experts, we see that there's a new product every single week, and it's making products that we've interacted with previously over the last few years, it can be consolidating them into one area. Microsoft Fabric's a great example of that. You've got so much data everywhere. So the roadmap is there. You can see that. And then even reliability, we have so little issues generally with anything cloud. We do on-prem as well. If you build it HA, if you build anything HA enough, you should have limited issues, which we've luckily really not ran into any issues on either side. So I think reliability is as good as we could have made it on-prem ourselves with our skill set, experts in so many different areas, but that's there and that already exists, and you don't need to have those 3 separate massive skill sets with the Azure side if you build it right. If you are willing to think about the cost, think about the backup, everything up front, it's all there. But then even then, we've not really had to use much of the DR products. Backup is great when we've needed it, but even then, reliability just seems rock solid. So I think that might have been a problem for people back in the day. Oh, I'm scared of having it all under one roof. But it's not under one roof if you built it correctly. Yeah. It's one portal you access it from. Yeah. It's one pane of glass, but you can have it under as many roofs as you want, theoretically, if you're willing to pay for it. So yeah, reliability, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's basically whatever you want and you're willing to pay for, you can have.
Yeah. Which comes back to cost.
Yes.
Now you think your cost is higher because you've not optimized. So, that can feed back into it, which is why, reliability doesn't come there, and roadmap just, I think there's so much new technology coming into the cloud and you don't need to go and find the new product. I think that's a big one as well. There's plenty of times when we needed a technology to fulfill a specific requirement either for ourselves or for a customer, and then it's going and finding it. All right, there's 7 of them, right? Let's set up 7 calls. They're going to give us a presentation. I just need the information. I want to know what your numbers are. How much is this going to cost me? It's all there. Like the roadmap will also include the pricing calculator, so I can just see what the cost of this product is going to be. And I know it's reliable because I've already got the reliability there. So the idea that you can just get this new product comes in and it's good quality stuff though. I think maybe this is, maybe I'm biased on this, but Microsoft was a little bit of a dirty word 10 years ago. Up to 10 years before that at least. It's a bit of a dirty word, like it wasn't a great name. Like everyone had to use it for their office computers. But I feel like since Azure is one of the big 3 players in cloud, I feel like the name's just getting stronger and stronger every day, which is great. Because then when they introduce a new product, you can kind of trust that it's probably going to be a really good version of whatever they're doing. Again, Fabric's one of the newest ones, and that's just a good example of a good new product. Yeah. So reliability and technical roadmap, I think it's there, at least for the biggest cloud providers, without looking at the little ones.
So when it comes to the quote, do we think this is a myth busted?
Yes, no. you can just bend the truth. So
it's the context, isn't it?
83% are going to be repatriated. Yeah, but how much? Yeah. It's not 83% of cloud workloads. It's 83% of people said they're going to relocate something. And
cloud spend's still going to go up. And on-prem's going to go down.
Yeah, like I think, IT spend is just increasing. Like in cloud, even on-prem, like the spend is increasing. It's not as increasing as much on-prem. It's all increasing all across the board. So it's a great industry to be in anyway, wherever your skill set sits. But yes, 83% of people are going to bring something back on-prem, but not 83% of their workloads. You gotta find that report and just look into it yourself and just see that with context, it's not all roses for the on-prem tin world.
I think we call that marketing.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, that's been another episode of Experts in Polo Shirts. We hope you liked it. Please leave a review, share it on social media, and we'll see you on the next one.
Hit the bell icon. Not the Dell icon.